2 weeks until Election Day, and President Trump is on the attack, taking aim at Dr. Fauci. Some good news when it comes to COVID in schools, and a literal news flash. A major media figure shows just a little too much of himself on a Zoom call. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, October 20th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Oh, it's a little early in the morning to be talking about this Jeffrey Toobin story. We'll save it for the end. It's too much.
Okay.
I like what you did there, though. News flash. I got it.
All right. A lot of election headlines this morning, Carlo. The Supreme Court will allow Pennsylvania election officials to count mailed-in ballots received up to 3 days after Election Day. So this is a win, in theory, for Democrats in a crucial swing state. Meanwhile, ahead of Thursday's final debate, the debate commission says that it will cut the mics of each candidate when their opponent is delivering their opening statements on each topic. President Trump lashed out at that rule change, but said he will be there. Carlo, this debate is supposed to be focused on foreign policy. The Trump camp says that they intend to make the focal point Hunter Biden's business deals in Ukraine.
The debate thing, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I get why they're doing it, obviously, because the last time was such a just train wreck. But in some ways, I feel like, it's the, American people's right to sort of see these guys in their natural habitats, I guess, if you will. But I don't know. I haven't really made up my mind. But I do want to go back to
it
before we go back
benefits Trump, by the way. I mean, because he should want this because he'll come off a little bit more restrained after that first debate was such a debacle.
Exactly, and that debate, the debate was reflected in the polls. I mean, his numbers dropped right after that debate showing. By the way, he has just been on an absolute tear these last 24 hours. And I know it's kind of like exhausting to keep talking about this, but the president's been lashing out at everyone from Dr. Fauci to the media. He called Dr. Fauci a, quote, idiot and a disaster. He called Joe Biden a criminal. He called CNN, quote, a bunch of dumb bastards because they spend too much time focusing on this pandemic, which, of course, has killed 220,000 Americans and counting. The Fauci thing, I mean, I can't say that I understand the strategy of sort of making Fauci the foil in the last 2 weeks of the election. I mean, you're down in the polls. I don't think that's what people want to hear, but hey, I'm not a highly paid political strategist, so maybe they know something.
Just to interrupt you really quickly, just to give some color here, the president was making these comments on a call with his campaign staff, and media was invited to listen in. It's not like the audio recordings were leaked or anything. It was an open call that media could listen to.
No, that's a good point. Thanks for clarifying that. But I think the whole thing just goes back to what we were saying the other day, Jill, which is, he's playing to the base. That's the strategy in the last couple of weeks. But he needs more than the base to win. Anyway, I do want to go back to what you said briefly on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling. That's very important. The Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4 on this case, which really just lets stand a lower court ruling about mail-in ballots and when they can be counted, even if they're postmarked after Election Day. If and when Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court, which is probably going to happen next week, this is the kind of case that will go the other way, right? It's not just, the argument against Barrett from liberals and progressives is, about Roe v. Wade and Obamacare and overturning these big precedents. But it's not just the big precedents. The more important thing are how the court will rule in little cases like this that have a big impacts. A 6-3 court means that even if John Roberts votes with the liberals, as he did this time, the court is still 5-4. So it doesn't even really matter. So if you assume that Amy Coney Barrett is seated on Election Day, which I think is a pretty fair assumption at this point, imagine there's some kind of challenge in Pennsylvania. If the vote is close, that challenge gets bumped up to the Supreme Court, which will almost certainly rule in the president's favor, I think, in a case like this. So look, this is the cost of doing business for a lot of elected Republicans who may detest Donald Trump as a person and even as a politician, but he gave them 3 relatively young Supreme Court judges in 4 years, and that will be a far more influential legacy probably than anything else he's done, at least when it comes to sort of determining the future of American politics.
Yeah, I believe that Judge Kavanaugh would actually become the new swing vote. That's kind of what a lot of
Yeah.
judicial watchers say. By the way, the New York Times Santa College poll just dropped moments ago. It shows Biden with a 9-point lead nationally, which means absolutely nothing because we don't vote. It's not a popular vote. But there is.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, Jill. It's true that national polls are not as relevant, obviously, as swing state polls, but a 9-point national, if you can't win the electoral college if you're down 9 points. That's not to say that this necessarily reflects the actual state of the country, but when it's more than a few points nationally, the mathematics just don't work.
If you trust the polling, though,
Right,
you know,
right.
again, I feel like you and I just go point counterpoint on this. Trump was way ahead in 2016 too, there's Trafalgar is a group that does their own polling, and I just want to mention this. It was an article I sent you yesterday. They are the only poll right now that's basically saying that they believe that Trump can win this thing, and so according to this article that was in the National Review, much of their approach focuses on accounting for the so-called social desirability bias. Quote, I've got to get past what you want to say in public and get to what you really feel, because what's in your heart is going to be what's on that ballot. I've seen posts on Instagram that have said, if you vote for Trump, you are a racist. Okay, I have friends who I follow who have posted that. Would I just say, forget me, but just say other people saw that, right? Are they admitting that they're going to vote for Trump? I'm just saying, Trump supporters at this point have been painted as racist for even just supporting him. So it's become taboo in many places to even tell a pollster, I think, that you're voting Trump.
No, I get the shy voter argument. On the polling, though, the only thing I want to say is, Jill, I was taking my walk yesterday, my neighborhood walk, because it was just another beautiful fall day here, and I was thinking about what you were saying about the how you've seen so many yard signs for Trump in Long Island and not so many for Biden. I've heard that just anecdotally from other people. I mean, my dad's in Pittsburgh right now. He says the Trump signs are everywhere. And I was noticing, and again, I'm talking about Brooklyn here, which is like the least representative place on earth. But what I was noticing was what appears to be a lot of Biden signs in my neighborhood aren't actually Biden signs. They're these signs that say "Buy Don." They look like the Biden insignia, and they say "Buy." It's like a pun, right? Like "Buy Donald Trump." But what made me think about that is what we were talking about last week about how it's not that people are excited to vote for Joe Biden, but they are excited to vote against Donald Trump. And I thought that the sort of yard sign anecdote, at least in my neighborhood, sort of verified that theory.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what the messaging is.
Right.
Okay, on the COVID front, Ireland and Wales imposing some of the strictest lockdown restrictions in Europe. People in Ireland must stay within 3 miles of their homes. All non-essential businesses will close for 6 weeks. Wales is going a step further, instituting a circuit breaker lockdown and telling residents and non-essential workers that they must stay at home for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is urging countries experiencing sharp increase in cases to get really serious about quarantining people who may have been exposed to the virus, saying it's one of the major reasons that we are in this new wave in the Northern Hemisphere.
A couple of pieces of encouraging news I wanted to mention today. The TSA says that they have screened, on Sunday, they screened 1 million passengers. That's the first time 1 million people have taken a flight in the United States in a single day since March, since before the lockdown started.
Why is that encouraging? Is that encouraging, you just mean on the economic front? That's not encouraging on the COVID front.
Well, I think it's encouraging that people are starting to fly more. I mean, just that's a good thing for the. I mean, I guess it's not a good thing if you're talking about people, spreading the virus to other places. But I think that it means that there's more people flying, there's more people traveling. And I think that that's just good for the economy. It's good for the airline industry, if nothing else. So look, there were 2.6 million people who flew on the same Sunday last year, so we're still a long ways to go. But that is inching up. And the bigger thing, though, is what you teased earlier, Jill. We talked a couple of weeks ago about that study that was really promising in terms of COVID transmission at schools. Yesterday, the New York City Public Schools just put out their preliminary data from the first 3 weeks of classes. So the school system sponsors 16,500 tests. Just 28 of those tests came back positive, 20 staff and 8 students, which is a remarkably small number. And again, I think that's just more data that suggests what we've been saying, which is, we were really worried that schools were going to be these super spreader events. And it doesn't appear, at least in K through 12, that is the case.
So the really fascinating thing that's happening right now is that, experts originally thought that college kids would be the ones who could follow the rules, or that these older kids would social distance and wear masks, and that the younger kids in elementary school would be a problem. Because we were asking, how do you get a 5-year-old to sit in a mask all day? Turns out it's not so hard. They follow rules, okay? And it's the 5-year-olds that are following the protocols, but the college kids who aren't. And so that's what you're seeing. It's that these colleges were originally responsible for these outbreaks across the country, and perhaps the elementary schools not so much. The kids, the classes are spread out. The kids wear masks. My daughter, who's 2, always sees her cousins who are in elementary and middle school wearing masks, right? If they want to come into our house, they wear a mask. When they get close, they wear a mask. She wants to wear a mask. Like, she has a little mask. I never thought she would want to put it on.
That's funny.
But the truth is, though, we don't really know the complete picture about the data on schools, because forgetting the political implications of what the president was saying on that call that you mentioned earlier. It was, what are the policy implications of that? People are tired of COVID, right? That's his message. He's tired of COVID. So there's no national strategy when it comes to getting kids back to the classroom. It's just kind of like free-for-all. Every school does what they want to do. They figure it out. Every state's doing what they want to do. So there's no group that's really collecting this data, right? So the New York City Public Schools did it. And in many cases, it's up to individual schools to self-report. So the schools that we're hearing the most from are probably the schools that are doing better. So unfortunately, there's the policy implications of just saying, we're over it, let's not listen to Dr. Fauci. Americans are sick of hearing about COVID. Is just, there's no strategy except just wait for a vaccine.
Yeah, no, you're right. By the way, did you read the Andrew Cuomo profile in the New Yorker this week? I meant to mention it to you. You should, I'll send it to you. It's long, but it's really good. It just sort of brings you back to those days in March and April. It doesn't particularly make him look good, by the way, but it's just a really good piece of reporting. I don't know why I thought of that, but
we haven't mentioned that he's out with a book about coronavirus. So at least in New York, I mean, he has staked his political life and future on New York's response to the virus. So I feel like, at the very least, he's going to take it quite seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, tens of millions of Americans are out of work, but for the ones who are still employed, it is not exactly a picnic right now. A new Associated Press poll found that a quarter of U.S. workers have considered quitting their jobs in recent months, mostly because of the stresses of having to juggle work and other responsibilities, as well as fear of contracting the virus while on the job. For lower wage workers, the numbers are even higher. 39% of workers making less than $30,000 a year say that they have thought about quitting. Incredible.
I thought that this poll was really interesting, and I wanted to talk about it today briefly, Jill, just because of this has been something that you and I have been talking about for so long now. One bright spot in this poll, the majority, 57% of respondents said that they are satisfied with what their employers are doing to help, just in terms of giving them the resources that they need and just like the technology they need to do their job, and being good about, having to come in late or having to leave or to log off early if they have kids in class. But it's like you said the other day, it's almost taboo to talk about this, right? Because people like us, especially us, like we're employed, relatively comfortably working from home. I mean, you're actually in the office today.
I was going to say,
I'm
who's working from home?
yeah, yeah,
Speak for
right.
yourself.
Um, yeah,
I'm
we have it
getting my
about as good
butt
as
in here every morning at 5 a.m.
you're right. I should
walking
have
through a
mentioned that.
lobby
But
where there's no masks. Okay, I'll stop.
But I was just going to say we have it about as good as anybody in the country right now, just in terms of our how relatively smooth it has gone. But that doesn't mean it doesn't suck, right? I mean, it sucks. It sucks for everybody right now. But I think it's totally fine to talk about how much it sucks, even if you're relatively doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I mentioned in my article, and I've mentioned here on the podcast, is there's also this feeling, at least I have, of like impending doom, that it's going to, that not only, like the worst is yet to come, just in terms
Right.
of the next few months. This thing started in March. That was a really dark time for this country, at least in New York.
Yeah.
And there was a national lockdown. But then it got warmer and you could do stuff outside. We're about to go into winter, right? And if anything, it's like every day that we send my daughter to school, we're just like, we'll take any day. We'll take, and if eventually things
Yeah.
shut down, they shut down. But like, let it just happen. Let us go with this as long as it can go. So I think that there's just also this feeling of like, there's no way out of this yet. And we're about to go
Yeah.
into the winter months. Speaking of just not over, this year's historic wildfire season not over. The Calwood fire in Colorado's Boulder County becoming one of the state's most expensive fires ever, while a separate fire known as the Cameron Peak Fire has been burning for 2 months. It's now the state's largest ever. Thousands have been forced to evacuate. At least 26 homes have been destroyed. The fires are being fed by these ferocious winds with gusts 60 miles per hour in some areas. So again, not just California here.
Yeah. Exactly. This is spread across the American West. I don't want to stay too long on this, Jill, but I have been reading a fair amount lately about forest management because I'm a weirdo, I guess. But it's just one of those topics that I felt like I wasn't very well versed in, so I wanted to sort of learn more about it. So I've been reading a lot of reporting on it, and President Trump is actually partially right when it comes to what he says about the wildfires. He blames these wildfires on poor forest management. Obviously, it's that combined with climate change, right? But it's not 100% climate change. And I don't know much about Colorado, but everything that I've read about California's forestry policy suggests that it's really been decimated by the state's powerful environmental lobby, which is, really steadfast against any forest thinning policies, which is this idea where you intentionally burn some of the underbrush and some of the smaller trees that have become such fuel for these fires. There's also the issue of urban sprawl with more people living close to the fire zone. All of this is not to say that climate change isn't making these fires worse. But I think that the reason why I mentioned that, Jill, is just because we really have got to get out of this binary thinking when it comes to climate change, right? Where climate becomes just like another one of these battle lines in the culture war. It's just too important an issue for that to become one of these political virtue signaling issues. So I just wanted to mention that I'm obviously not an expert on forest management, but it's an issue that is worth keeping in mind and diving into more.
Proof, Carlo, I guess, that you have a lot of free time these days. No, I'm just kidding. It's incredibly important. Okay, and finally, we just wanted to mention this one story that is just out there that everyone's talking about. Jeffrey Toobin, the New Yorker magazine has now suspended Toobin, which is its well-known staff writer who moonlights also as a CNN analyst, which is where you may or may not have seen him. He allegedly exposed himself on a Zoom call with colleagues. Toobin says the incident was accidental. He didn't realize that his camera was still on. And he apologized for, quote, an embarrassingly stupid mistake. The New Yorker says it's investigating, and CNN says it has given him some time off to deal with, quote, a personal issue.
Yeah, if you want the deets on this story, Check out the New York Post this morning. They'll tell you everything you really need to know. I was just surprised when I read the story last night. I was just surprised that this hasn't happened sooner, just given how we're all at home on these calls all day. But that's all I'll say. It just, what an idiot.
Totally. I mean, and it's like, oh, of all the ways to derail your career, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't even, there's nothing I could say that will be appropriate here, so I'm just going to
I know. You can't make the
leave
good
it there.
jokes.
All right, everybody, that's what you need to know for Tuesday, October 20th.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.